Genesis 22, 1 through 19. This is the story of Abraham sacrificing Isaac. It begins here, some time later. We don't know how long Abraham and Isaac have been together at this point, but the answer is likely years. It's highly likely that Isaac at this point is a young boy, maybe in his teenage years or even in his 20s, and it's then that God tests Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, and Abraham immediately says, Here I am. Then God said, Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac. Take your son, that's the first one. Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, just really reminding him how special his son is. Go to the region of Moriah, sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Burnt offerings were obviously burnt and 100% burnt, completely consumed. This is, if you're Abraham, just the most confusing, perplexing, and terrifying thing to ever hear from God. And so let's go down to the bottom and begin to fill in our story arc, verses 1 through 2. Isaac is now grown, and God tells Abraham to sacrifice him. That's how the story begins. Strong beginning. Early the next morning, Abraham got up, loaded his donkey. He took 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God told him about. So again, we just see immediate obedience. He didn't wait. He didn't drag his feet. Early the next morning, he got up, loaded the donkey, 2 servants, gets enough wood for the burnt offering, and he sets out for the place God told him about. So let's go down to back to the bottom. Verse 3. Again, immediate obedience. And back up to verse 4. On the 3rd day, so it took 3 days of journeying to get to this place from where they were in Beersheba, Abraham looks up and he saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you. We will worship and we will come back to you. At this point, we don't know if Abraham is bluffing or if he is just that sure that both he and Isaac will return. I think based on a lot of what we see in the New Testament, particularly in Hebrews 11, which says that Abraham believed that God could even raise Isaac from the dead, that he's not bluffing, that he does believe this in some way, and I think it demonstrates his faithfulness. So he's saying we'll worship, that's the sacrifice, and then we'll come back. And that's verses 4 and 5. So get our line back, verses 4 through 5. Isaac and Jacob arrive and depart. And not Isaac and Jacob. Whoopsie, I've been saying Jacob, haven't I? Isaac and Abraham arrive, depart, and Abraham promises, we will return. Let's go back up. Verse 6. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac. I think this looks forward then to Jesus, who will also carry his cross. And he himself carried the fire, so he brings a torch, and the knife. So the father here, Abraham, is the instrument then of death and of sacrifice, and the son is carrying the wood that he will be burned on. A lot of parallels here, foreshadowing of Jesus and the Father. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, Father. Yes, my son, Abraham replied. The fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? And I don't know what it would be like to be Abraham in this moment, but I'm sure that question just destroyed him. And yet Abraham answers, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. And the 2 of them went on together. This is very much like this other sentence up here at the end of verse 5. We don't know if Abraham is bluffing. Oops. We don't know if he's bluffing or if he's serious. I think he's not bluffing. I think he believes this. Even if he doesn't know how God's going to provide, I think he believes it at the end of the day. So that's verses 6 through 8. And they're a big deal. Verses 6 through 8. Isaac asks, "Where is the lamb?" Right? And Abraham says, God will provide. And that is going to be a huge portion of this story. God will provide. Coming back up to verse 9. When they had reached the place God had told them about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Let's just take a moment to do that. Verse 9. Arrives and prepares sacrifice. And I want us to be clear here, this is something that's really important. Isaac does not fight. Isaac at this point is strong enough, likely, to fend for himself. He could stop this, fight it off if he wants to, but it would seem that Isaac himself is trusting at least his father and the Lord with this moment. Verse 10, he reaches out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. And we're getting very close now to the pinnacle of the story. You can feel the tension. Abraham raises the knife. And then here we go. 11. But, thank God for this word, the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, he replied. It's the exact way that this story began in verse 1. Do not lay a hand on the boy, he said. Don't do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. By the way, the word me here means that that this is not just an angel, but God himself speaking in this moment. So let's go back down, and verses 11 through 12, God stops Abraham. But more than that, God verifies Abraham's faith. So a huge piece of this lesson as well is faith works. And if you wanted to see that, the place to go is James chapter 2. Continues on, verse 13. Abraham looks up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its thorns. He went over, took the ram, and sacrificed as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. Looking back up here, God himself will provide the offering, my son. So 8 finds its finish down here in 14. The Lord will provide, and to this day, I just said, on the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. So now verses 13 through 14, the Lord provides. We come back up to verse 15. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you, make your descendants as numerous as stars, the sand of the seashore. That's Genesis 15. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies. Again, 15, the end of it. And through your offspring, all nations on the earth will be blessed because you've obeyed me. That would be 12. So it's kind of a rehearsing of the different covenants and promises that God had made to Abraham. And God affirms them by himself. He swears by himself. There's nothing left for him to swear by. There's nothing greater for God to swear by, so he swears by himself. So in verses 15 through 18, God reaffirms the covenant. It's important not to take from this lesson that somehow salvation is by works. That's not the case. Not by works. It may be that God will set a covenant, and part of that covenant involves works, But that's a different thing than salvation. Remember that Abraham was first justified by faith. And then finally, verse 19, when Abraham returned to the servants, they set out for Beersheba, and Abraham stayed in Beersheba. So then settle in Beersheba. Obviously, this in many ways looks forward to Jesus, who took that cross upon his back and walked up a hill. The thing that God doesn't ask us to do, which is to sacrifice our children, he provides. The Lord provides a sacrifice, a lamb, to take away our sin, and he does that in the person of Jesus Christ. This is Genesis chapter 22. It's one of the most important chapters that we see in the Old Testament, and it's very fruitful if you will study it.